Hi, I'm Dave Johnson, and thanks for checking into part 2 of my environmental painting tutorial. In the first one, I had detailed how to do a basic speed painting in about an hour, using mostly grayscale and then overlays in my paint and the GIMP, so everything is open source. And so on this next one, I took that same image, spent another hour on it, and did some rendering, and let's get started. So the first thing I'm doing is going through and selecting local color values to pull out the palette, so that everything, all those colors will be localized, and the internal logic of the the value scale will make sense for this image as we begin to do the rendering. First thing I did upon looking at the speed painting is I thought that that smaller temple in the background on the right needed some changing. It didn't mesh very well with the one in the foreground, and so I decided to round that one off, make it look a little bit softer and more aged, and also adding an additional temple poking out of the trees back behind that one. So it's more like this is an overgrown city or complex of ruins as opposed to just a couple of pagodas with a river running between them. So you can see I'm adding some bushes and trees as depth in between the second and third ruined buildings. And sort of punching that taller building back, flipping the canvas again so that I don't get stuck working from one angle too much and start making mistakes. It's good to switch back and forth repeatedly. It's something that I could get away with doing more of. Going through and adding some highlights now to the foreground. The fact that there's a lot of dark fields of dark color in the foreground definitely helps with or lends itself well to additional rendering when you're trying to pull out highlights, so you can have that high contrast up in the foreground. With traditional painting, we call that chiaroscuro, working from dark to light, and works really well if you've got that dark base to work from. You can just pull colors out of it really quickly and create the illusion of highlights and depth. You can see I'm doing that to a lot of the foreground plant material, so this definitely looks more rendered and less like silhouettes, which it was when we finished up with the speed painting. Again, I'm mostly, in fact, almost entirely for this one using the round brush between 50 and 80% opacity and just varying the size of it. You can see right now with those highlights I dropped the size of that brush down pretty small. Sort of building up layers of marks as opposed to doing big swaths of brush strokes. I do use one other brush during this rendering process, and that was sort of a scatter brush that I was using for the texture of plant material and that sort of thing. You can see it in some of the vines on that are draping down from the foreground temple, as well as some of the work on the trees. And working out the silhouette some more on that secondary chunk of land there. Minimum, I'm going to be adding another tree in there to break that up, because it looks too much like an overgrown field and not enough like it's set in an overgrown forested area. So defining some of the highlights on those steps leading up to the temple, and working in some more shadows along the base of the island there. And again, it's just a matter of spending the time to build up those layers of textures in order to make them appear more realistic and detailed. I'm trying to be careful as we recede in the background not to use anything too dark or too light. Like your lightest lights and your darkest dark should definitely be up in the foreground if you can manage it. Start with the skeleton of that tree and then just adding on some greenage in layers. These greens are definitely grayed out, low saturation. Your saturation decreases as you move back into the atmosphere. Everything tends to blue out or gray out. So you'll see I'll pull out a few strong highlights there, but later on I'll be muting them. So just continuing to delineate between the midground and the background. I was still having some problems with this temple, so I decided to start reapplying my drawing skills so that I could work out the actual shape of this dome. You can see there I just added a map of where the core shadow was going to fall on the curvature of that dome. So if you've ever done your egg rendering exercise in art class, that's where that's coming from. And that applies to, if you can do that, you can apply that technique to just about, well, to any form that exists. There's always going to be a core shadow, and you know, highlight, mid-tone, bounce light, that sort of thing. So it's just a matter of practice and habit. You see I'm working in between drawing and painting, so you'll see some cross-hatching and mark making in there, and then going back in and painting with a thicker brush. Right now it's starting to look a little bright, and in a moment I'll break out a large grayed out brown gray brush and soften it. Yep, there we go, just soften it. And zooming out to get a good idea of how that composition is coming together as a whole. Darkening up some of those storm clouds that are looming over the left side of the picture, and I'll be on the right at the end of the video. So just spending some time using those lighter colors, putting in some details, sort of cutting away at negative space and etching the sky in there. See, I'm doing a lot of sampling of colors that are close to each other in that area. Showing where the light's coming from and where it's going to go. And now I'm sort of cutting out a little bit more of the silhouettes of the forest in the background. Doing a little highlighting and detailing on the third ruined building. And again, it's best if you've got your color selector handy to sample colors that are nearby and values that are nearby to what you're painting, so that everything is in relationship to each other in terms of value and localized color. Again, moving from side to side, you don't want to spend too much time on any one section of a picture. Throwing in some darks just to pop that out, because I felt like I had washed it out a bit much. Delineating that temple a little bit more so that it reads well from the distance. And looks like we got all our layers together. And that's that. Hope that was helpful to you, and thanks for watching, and feel free to comment below. Thanks. Bye.